I knocked over the vase again. The crash echoed through the marble foyer of the Rossi mansion, water spreading across the gleaming floor in a pattern that looked almost artistic if you squinted and pretended it wasn't my third disaster of the morning. My hands flew to my mouth as the ceramic shards glittered like accusations under the chandelier's unforgiving light. Dio mio, Leah. Grace appeared from the kitchen doorway, dish towel slung over her shoulder, shaking her head with that mix of exasperation and affection I'd come to recognize over 3 years. That's the second Ming vase this month. Technically, it was Qing Dynasty, I corrected, then immediately regretted it. Which doesn't make it better. I know. I'll pay for it. Again. Add it to my tab. Grace laughed, the sound warm despite my catastrophe. My brother doesn't care about the vases, Kara. He cares that you keep trying to dust them while carrying 3 other things. Use 2 hands. Or better yet, focus on one task at a time. Where's the efficiency in that? I grabbed the mop from the utility closet, already calculating how to clean this mess before Marco returned from his morning meeting. I can multitask. I'm excellent at multitask. My phone buzzed. I glanced down to read the text from Henry, my childhood friend who'd recently moved back to the city, and didn't see the shard of porcelain until my knee connected with it. Madonna Santa. Grace rushed over as I hopped on one foot, already knowing the small cut wasn't serious, but also knowing I'd somehow gotten vase water on my other shoe in the process. This is what I mean. You're brilliant, Leah. You organize my brother's entire household, manage his schedule better than his actual assistant, remember every detail of every event, but you do it all while tripping over your own feet. It's a gift, I muttered, examining the minor scrape. Some people have grace. I have momentum. The front door opened with the particular weighted sound that meant Marco had returned earlier than expected. My stomach did that stupid flip it had started doing lately whenever he entered a room, which I firmly ignored, because acknowledging it would be acknowledging something I couldn't afford to acknowledge. Marco Rossi walked in like he owned the space, which he did, but it was more than that. At 33, he carried himself with the kind of certainty that came from building an empire through intelligence and ruthlessness in equal measure. His tailored charcoal suit fit perfectly, his dark hair styled with the precision that marked everything he did. But it was his eyes that always caught me. Dark brown, almost black, observing everything with an intensity that should have been intimidating. It was intimidating. I'd just gotten used to it. What happened? His voice was calm, controlled, the same tone he used when negotiating million-dollar deals or handling threats to his operations. I murdered a vase, I announced, still holding the mop. In my defense, it was standing exactly where I needed to reach, and physics betrayed me. Grace snorted. Marco's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been amusement. The vase, he said slowly, was a wedding gift from the Calabrian family. 17th century. Worth approximately $40,000. My stomach dropped to my knees. I'll start a payment plan, maybe set up a GoFundMe, appeal to the patron saint of clumsy housekeepers. There is no patron saint of clumsy housekeepers, Marco replied, stepping carefully around the water. And you're not paying for it. But you're also not fired, he continued, cutting off my protest, despite Grace's assurances 3 years ago that you were a hurricane in human form who can't sit still. He glanced at his sister, who had the decency to look slightly guilty. She also said you were the most competent, detail-oriented person she'd ever met. Both things appeared to be true simultaneously. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. An actual fish would have been more articulate. Marco moved past me toward his office, but paused. Patrick mentioned you called him a muscular broccoli last week, while making his protein shake. Heat flooded my face. I thought he was in the gym. I was talking to Grace. It was a compliment. Broccoli is healthy and... He found it hilarious, Marco interrupted, as did I, when he repeated it during our security briefing. His gaze held mine for a moment longer than necessary. Clean up the vase, Leah. Try not to injure yourself further in the process. He disappeared into his office, leaving me standing in a puddle of my own making, both literal and metaphorical. He likes you, Grace said quietly, mopping up the water I'd somehow forgotten about. He tolerates me because I keep his life organized. I corrected, bending to collect the larger shards. There's a difference. Is there? Grace's knowing smile made me uncomfortable. You've been here 3 years, Leah. You've seen the others he's hired. The ones who were perfectly professional, impeccably qualified, respectful to the point of fear. None of them lasted 6 months. You insult his security chief, break priceless antiques, and walk around humming show tunes while organizing his life with military precision. And he keeps you. That's because I'm good at my job, I insisted. But my voice sounded uncertain even to my own ears. You're excellent at your job, Grace agreed. But that's not why you're still here. Before I could formulate a response that didn't sound defensive, my phone buzzed again. Henry, confirming plans for Friday. Grace glanced at the screen over my shoulder. Who's Henry? Childhood friend. He moved back to the city last month. We're catching up Friday. I typed a quick confirmation. He offered to drive me to the neighborhood reunion thing. Remember those block parties our old street used to do? You grew up in Little Italy? 3 blocks from where Henry lived. We lost touch when I moved for work, but he looked me up through social media. I pocketed my phone. It'll be nice to see everyone again. Apparently Mrs. Chen still makes those dumplings that could cure any bad day. Grace made a non-committal sound that, in retrospect, should have warned me something was brewing. But I was too busy finishing the cleanup, reorganizing the disaster I'd created, and trying not to think about why my pulse jumped whenever Marco was nearby. The rest of the day proceeded normally, which in the Rossi household meant organized chaos. I coordinated a dinner party for 8, rescheduled 3 meetings, managed to order replacement orchids for the ones I'd overwatered last week, and only tripped twice. Progress. That evening, as I prepared to leave, Marco emerged from his office. Leah. I turned, smoothing my shirt automatically. Yes? The Santoro contract negotiations. You left the updated terms on my desk. With the modifications you wanted, color-coded by priority. The sections requiring immediate attention are marked in red. Yellow for review by end of week. Green for... I know the system. He stepped closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne. Something expensive and subtle that reminded me of cedarwood and confidence. You anticipated the counter-arguments I'd need for Sections 7 and 9. Added supporting data I hadn't requested. You would have needed it eventually, I said, uncertain whether this was praise or criticism. The Santoros always push back on liability clauses. I pulled comparable contracts from similar negotiations to strengthen your position. Marco studied me with that intense focus that made me feel simultaneously seen and scrutinized. You're wasted as household staff, Leah. I'm not wasted. I'm exactly where I caught myself before saying something revealing. I'm good at this. You're extraordinary at this. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. You notice everything, remember everything, process information faster than most people on my actual business team. Then it's a good thing I work for you, I managed, proud that my voice stayed steady despite my heart attempting to escape my ribcage. Yes, Marco said quietly. It is. The moment stretched, waited with something I didn't want to examine. Then Grace called from the kitchen about tomorrow's menu, and the spell broke. Good night, Mr. Rossi, I said, reverting to formality like armor. Marco, he corrected, as he had been correcting for 3 years. How many times must I tell you? At least once more, apparently. I grabbed my bag, offering a smile that felt more real than I intended. Good night, Marco. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Good night, Leah. Try not to break anything on your way out. The night is young, I called over my shoulder. Anything could happen. I heard what might have been a laugh as I left, but I didn't look back to confirm it. Friday arrived wrapped in the kind of golden autumn light that made even the city's concrete feel romantic. I finished my morning tasks with unusual efficiency, partly because I was excited about the reunion, partly because Marco had been watching me more than usual all week, and it made my hands even clumsier than normal. You're humming again, Patrick observed, entering the kitchen where I was preparing Marco's afternoon espresso. The security chief, still muscular, still reminiscent of broccoli, grinned at me. Hot date? Childhood friend picking me up for a neighborhood thing, I corrected, measuring the coffee grounds with the precision Marco preferred. Not that my social life is anyone's business, Broccoli Man. You're never going to let that go, are you? Never, I confirmed cheerfully. Own your vegetable identity, Patrick. It suits you. He laughed, but his radio crackled before he could respond. Boss needs you in the study, he said, suddenly professional. Something about the shipping manifests. I delivered Marco's espresso first. Perfect temperature, perfect crema, and found him staring at his computer screen with the particular intensity that meant someone had made an error, and he was deciding how severely to handle it. The Rotterdam shipment, I said, setting down the cup. The containers were mislabeled. I already contacted the port authority and our customs broker. It's being corrected now. Should clear by Tuesday. Marco looked up, and something in his expression made my breath catch. You handled it already. 2 hours ago, when I saw the discrepancy in the morning report. You were on the phone with the Calabrians, so I took initiative. I hope that was appropriate. It was more than appropriate. He stood, moving around the desk in that fluid way he had. Leah, you realize most of my actual staff wouldn't have noticed that error until it caused a significant delay? I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just pay attention. It's not that remarkable. It is to me. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. You've become indispensable. The word hung between us, heavy with implications I couldn't afford to explore. I should finish the library reorganization before Henry arrives. Grace mentioned you wanted the reference section. Henry. Marco's tone shifted, cooling slightly. The childhood friend. Right. He's picking me up at 6. I checked my watch, already calculating how much time I had. The reunion starts at 7, but knowing Mrs. Chen, the food will be ready early, and if we're late, we'll miss the good dumplings. He's driving you. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. My car's in the shop. Timing belt. Henry offered when I mentioned it yesterday. He's going to the reunion too. He grew up 2 blocks from my family. I started toward the door, then paused. Did you need something else with the manifests? I can pull the full documentation if... No. Marco's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's all. I left, but the strange tension followed me through the afternoon like a shadow I couldn't shake. At exactly 6 o'clock, a car horn sounded from the circular driveway. Through the window, I saw Henry's familiar grin, his hand waving enthusiastically. He'd aged well, still had that boyish energy that made everyone around him smile, still dressed like he'd grabbed whatever was clean from the laundry basket. I grabbed my jacket and bag, calling goodbye to Grace, and hurried down the front steps. That's when my coordination betrayed me spectacularly. My heel caught on the edge of the stone step. My ankle twisted, and suddenly I was falling forward with the kind of slow-motion clarity that let you know exactly how embarrassing this was going to be. Henry lunged from the driver's seat, catching me around the waist before I could faceplant on the driveway. Still graceful as ever, Leah. Shut up, I laughed, straightening but keeping a hand on his arm for balance. My coordination peaked at age 7 and it's been downhill since. Remember when you tripped during the Easter pageant and took down 3 other angels? I was 8, and those wings were a safety hazard. I was still laughing, still holding his arm, still completely unaware of the figure watching from the study window. Henry released me but kept his hand hovering near my elbow, protective. You okay? Twist anything? Just my dignity, as usual. I tested my ankle. Fine, thankfully. Come on. Mrs. Chen's dumplings wait for no one. As Henry opened the car door for me, I glanced back at the mansion, catching a glimpse of movement in Marco's study. But when I looked again, the window was empty. The reunion was exactly what I needed. Loud, chaotic, full of people who'd known me when I was gap-toothed and couldn't walk 3 steps without tripping. Mrs. Chen's dumplings were as perfect as memory promised. The neighborhood gossip was deliciously petty, and Henry kept me laughing with stories about his new job in graphic design. You seem happy, he observed around 9 o'clock, as we stood near the dessert table. Different than I remember. More. Settled. I like my job, I said, surprising myself with how true it was. My boss is demanding but fair. His sister is wonderful. The work is challenging. I'm good at it. Just good? Henry's eyes held knowing amusement. Leah, you were always brilliant. You just hid it behind the chaos. The chaos isn't hiding anything. The chaos is authentic. I grabbed a cannoli, biting into it with probably too much enthusiasm. I just learned to use it. Turns out being scattered works if you're scattered in all the right directions simultaneously. We stayed until nearly 11, and I was still laughing about something ridiculous when Henry pulled up to the Rossi mansion. The house was mostly dark except for Marco's study. He often worked late, handling business across different time zones. Thanks for tonight, I said, gathering my bag. I needed this. Anytime. We should do it more often. Henry smiled. Maybe next Friday? There's a new Italian place downtown that... Leah. Marco's voice cut through the night, sharp and cold. I turned to find him standing in the doorway, still in his work clothes but with his tie loosened, top button undone. The porch light cast his face in severe shadows, making him look almost dangerous. Mr. Rossi, I said automatically, then caught myself. Marco, you're still up. Who is this? Not a question, a demand. Henry, bless him, had no idea he'd just stepped into something complicated. Henry Mitchell, old friend of Leah's. You must be her boss. She's mentioned how demanding you are. He said it warmly, like it was a compliment. Marco's expression didn't change, but the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. How long have you been seeing each other? We're not... I started, but Henry, oblivious to the minefield, jumped in. Just reconnected last month. Can you believe it? Lost touch for 7 years. Then I literally ran into her at the grocery store. Felt like fate. Fate. Marco repeated the word like it tasted wrong. How convenient. Marco, I said carefully, sensing danger I couldn't quite identify. Henry and I are just friends. Childhood friends. He gave me a ride to a neighborhood reunion. That's all. That's all, Marco echoed, his gaze never leaving Henry. You should go, Mr. Mitchell. Leah has work tomorrow, early. The dismissal was absolute. Henry glanced at me, confused but polite enough not to argue. Right. Of course. See you next week, Leah? Maybe, I said, wanting to sound normal but hearing the uncertainty in my voice. I'll text you. After Henry drove away, I stood on the driveway, staring at Marco, who stared back with an intensity that made my pulse race for entirely wrong reasons. What was that? I demanded, finding my courage. You were incredibly rude. Was I... He descended the steps slowly, each movement controlled. Tell me, Leah, how often has Mr. Mitchell been driving you places, picking you up, taking you to reunions? Tonight was the first time. What is your problem? My problem, Marco said, voice dangerously soft, is that I don't know this man. I don't know his intentions. I don't know if he's safe. He's Henry. I've known him since I was 6. He's harmless. No man is harmless around you. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning I couldn't process. Marco's jaw clenched like he regretted speaking, but his eyes held mine, unflinching. That's not fair, I said quietly. You don't get to police my friendships. You're my employer, not my keeper. Am I? The question was barely audible. Is that all I am to you, Leah? My heart hammered against my ribs. What else would you be? For a moment I thought he might answer honestly, but then his expression shuddered, walls slamming back into place. Nothing, he said, turning toward the house. Get some rest. Tomorrow's schedule is demanding. I watched him disappear inside, leaving me standing in the driveway, confused and inexplicably hurt by something I couldn't name. Grace found me 10 minutes later, still standing there like an idiot. He saw you, she said simply. Through the study window. Saw Henry catch you. Saw you laughing. Saw the way you touched his arm. So? So my brother, who never loses control, just interrogated your friend like he was a hostile witness. Grace's expression was sympathetic. Leah, Kara, when are you going to admit what's happening here? Nothing's happening, I insisted. He was just being overprotective. You know how he is about security. That wasn't security. Grace squeezed my shoulder. That was jealousy. And if you can't see it, you're not as observant as I thought." She left me with that bomb, and I stood in the darkness, replaying every moment, every glance, every weighted word. Marco Rossi, jealous. Over me. It was impossible. It was absurd. It was, my traitorous heart whispered, exactly what I'd been hoping for without admitting it. The following week passed in a strange, tense dance where Marco and I circled each other like wary combatants who'd forgotten why they were fighting. He was colder, more distant, every interaction clipped to pure necessity. I was defiant, deliberately cheerful. If he wanted to be ridiculous about Henry, fine. I'd be aggressively normal about my friendship. Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed during lunch preparation. Henry, asking about Friday plans. Before I could think better of it, I answered his call on speaker while chopping vegetables. "Leah, so, that Italian place? Are we on for Friday?" "Absolutely," I said, perhaps too enthusiastically. "What time?" 7:30? I'll pick you up from work again if that's easier." "Perfect. See you then." I hung up and turned to find Marco standing in the kitchen doorway, his expression carved from ice. "Another date," he said flatly. "Another friend outing," I corrected, returning to the vegetables with more force than necessary. "Is there something you need? I'm preparing your lunch. I need you to stop being deliberately obtuse." The knife stilled in my hand. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze with all the frustration I'd been suppressing. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Marco stepped into the kitchen, and the space suddenly felt too small. "You're seeing him to prove something. I'm seeing him because he's my friend and I enjoy his company. Not everything is about you, Marco. Isn't it?" His voice dropped dangerously low. "You've worked here 3 years, Leah. 3 years without mentioning any friends, any social life, any romantic interests. Then suddenly this man appears, and you're going out twice in 1 week. Maybe I kept my personal life private because my employer made it clear we had a professional relationship." The words burst out before I could stop them. "Maybe I didn't think you'd care what I did on my own time." "You thought I didn't care?" Marco moved closer, his control fraying at the edges. "You honestly believed I didn't notice every time you smiled? Every time you laughed? Every small moment of joy you brought into this house?" My breath caught. "Marco, I notice everything about you, Leah." His hands clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself. "The way you hum when you're concentrating. How you bite your lip when you're worried about making a mistake. The fact that you always triple-check the coffee temperature because you know I'm particular. That you can't walk 3 steps without tripping over something, but you remember every detail of contracts you glanced at once. Then why—" my voice cracked. "Why are you only saying this now? Why only when Henry's involved?" "Because I'm a coward." The admission seemed to cost him. "Because you deserve better than a man whose hands are stained with blood. Because I convinced myself professional distance was kindness. And because watching another man catch you, make you laugh, plan dinners with you, it broke something in me I didn't know could break." The kitchen fell silent except for our breathing. "You're jealous," I whispered, finally saying it aloud. "Yes." No hesitation. "Irrationally, completely, frustratingly jealous of a man I've never met, who's done nothing wrong except exist near you." I should have been angry, should have maintained boundaries, should have protected myself. Instead, I said, "Henry's gay, Marco." He blinked. "What?" "Henry's gay. Happily partnered for 3 years with a man named Thomas, who's a pediatric surgeon. He couldn't make the reunion because he was on call." Henry showed me approximately 400 pictures of their cat, Mr. Whiskers, who apparently has Instagram followers. Marco's expression cycled through several emotions too quickly to track. "He's not remotely interested in me romantically. Never has been. We're friends. Actual, platonic, childhood friends who lost touch and reconnected." I crossed my arms, suddenly aware I'd been defending myself against accusations no one had made. "The Italian restaurant? He wants me to meet Thomas officially. It's a double friend date situation where I'll probably be the awkward third wheel talking too much about pasta shapes." "Pasta shapes," Marco repeated faintly. "I have opinions about pasta shapes. It's a whole thing. I was babbling now, nervous energy spilling out. Rigatoni is superior to penne for sauce retention. Fettuccine is objectively better than linguine despite what anyone says. Farfalla is decorative nonsense that... Leah. Marco's voice stopped my ramble. I've been acting like a possessive fool. Yes, I agreed. You have. You interrogated an innocent man, glared at me for a week, and generally behaved like someone with... I stopped, suddenly understanding what Grace had been trying to tell me. Like someone who cares. The words hung between us, fragile and enormous. I do care. Marco's control was completely gone now, raw honesty replacing it. More than I should, more than is appropriate, more than I can rationally explain. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. You walked into this house 3 years ago, broke a lamp within the first hour, called my accountant mathematically aggressive, and somehow became the center of my entire world. My heart was doing gymnastics. I called Frederick mathematically aggressive because he was. He tried to deduct the flowers as a business expense when they were clearly personal. You were right. You're always right about these things. You see details everyone else misses. You organize chaos into clarity. You make impossible things possible while tripping over your own feet. Marco stepped closer, and I could feel the heat radiating from him. And somewhere in the last 3 years, I stopped seeing you as staff and started seeing you as you. Brilliant, chaotic, essential you. Marco. My voice came out breathy. This is complicated. I know. You're my employer. I know. There are power dynamics and professional boundaries and... I know all of it, Leah. His hand rose, hovering near my face but not touching, asking permission. Tell me I'm alone in this. Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll step back. I'll maintain distance. I'll be only your employer. But tell me the truth. I should have lied. Should have protected us both. Should have been smart. Instead, I said, I notice things too, you know, like how you always pour your own coffee when I'm running late so I don't stress about it. How you rescheduled the Calabrian meeting last month because you knew I had a migraine, even though I didn't mention it. How you keep replacing the vases I break with cheaper versions, so I stop panicking about the cost. How you look at me sometimes like I'm something precious instead of something clumsy. His thumb brushed my cheek, the touch sending electricity through my entire nervous system. You are precious, clumsy and precious, chaotic and perfect. I'm going to drop something if you keep saying things like that. Fair warning. Marco laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was worth every broken vase, every awkward moment, every complicated feeling I'd been suppressing. Drop whatever you want, he said. I'll replace it all. But Leah, I need to know. I feel it too, I interrupted, because apparently I couldn't let him finish sentences tonight. I've felt it for months, maybe longer. I just thought. I bit my lip. You're perfect, Marco, controlled and powerful and successful. I'm the disaster who reorganizes your files while humming show tunes. I never imagined you'd look at me as anything but the hurricane your sister hired. Perfect. He repeated the word with something like wonder. Leah, I haven't felt human in years. I built walls so high I forgot what it felt like to want something beyond power and control. And then you appeared, breaking things and making terrible vegetable-based insults, and suddenly I was human again. Feeling things. Wanting things. His forehead touched mine. Wanting you. This is happening, I whispered. We're actually doing this. Only if you want it. Your choice. Always your choice. I thought about 3 years of carefully maintained professionalism, about power dynamics and appropriate boundaries, about all the rational reasons this was complicated. Then I thought about Marco's rare smiles, about the way he said my name like it mattered, about feeling seen, truly seen, for the first time in my adult life. I want it, I said. I want this. I want you. Even though you're going to drive me crazy with your control issues and I'm going to drive you crazy with my chaos. I'm counting on it. His smile was devastating. Though perhaps we should establish some ground rules. Like what? Like you're not staff anymore. Not really. We need to redefine this relationship properly. Marco's thumb traced my jawline. I'll hire someone else for household management. You'll work with me in the business side if you want. Your organizational skills are wasted on dusting and meal planning. But regardless, we're equals, Leah. In every way that matters. I like dusting, I protested weakly. And meal planning. And organizing your chaos. Then you can continue doing it because you choose to, not because you're employed to. The point is, removing the power imbalance. You've thought about this. I've thought about nothing else for months. He pulled back slightly, his expression serious. I need you to understand what you're accepting, Leah. My world isn't simple. There are dangers, complications, things I'm not proud of. If we do this, you're choosing all of it. I thought about the last 3 years, about the men in suits who visited for meetings, about the careful way Patrick and the security team operated, about things I'd observed and never questioned because they weren't my business. I'm not naive, Marco. I know who you are, what you do. I met his gaze steadily. I choose it anyway. I choose you anyway. The kiss, when it finally came, tasted like espresso and possibility, and 3 years of restrained wanting. His hands cradled my face like I was something breakable, and I gripped his shirt like he might disappear if I let go. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against mine. I'm still going to dinner with Henry on Friday, I said, because he's my friend, and I want to meet Thomas properly and discuss pasta shapes. Marco laughed against my hair. I wouldn't expect anything less, though I reserve the right to be irrationally anxious about it despite knowing better. You can text me obsessively. I'll respond with terrible vegetable puns about whatever we're eating. That's not reassuring. I never promised to be reassuring. I promised to be me. I pulled back to look at him. Chaotic, clumsy, too honest me. That's all I want, Marco said simply. That's all I've ever wanted. Grace found us an hour later, still in the kitchen, talking about everything and nothing, while I finally finished preparing lunch with Marco, watching like I was performing surgery instead of making sandwiches. Finally, Grace said, not even pretending to be surprised. I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you both in a closet. You knew? I asked. Everyone knew, Kara. Everyone except you two. She kissed her brother's cheek. Try not to break her. She's the best thing that's happened to this family in decades. I'm more worried about her breaking things, Marco said dryly, pulling me against his side. Starting with my composure. Your composure was already broken, I pointed out. I just helped you notice. And really, that was the truth of it. Marco hadn't changed. I hadn't fixed him. We'd simply stopped pretending we were anything other than what we'd become. Two people who saw each other clearly despite the chaos and control, and chose each other anyway. The shift from employer-employee to something infinitely more complicated happened gradually, like watching dawn break. Imperceptible, until suddenly everything was illuminated. Monday morning, I arrived at the mansion to find my workspace had been transformed. The small desk in the corner of the kitchen where I'd managed household tasks for 3 years was gone. In its place, nothing. Instead, Grace directed me to the second-floor office adjacent to Marco's study. A room I'd always assumed was storage. It wasn't storage. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the garden. A desk that probably cost more than my car sat positioned to catch natural light. My files, all of them, were already organized on custom shelving. A laptop, far superior to the ancient one I'd been using, sat waiting with my login already configured. Marco had Patrick and the staff move everything overnight, Grace explained, leaning against the doorframe with a knowing smile. He's been planning this for 2 weeks, since before the Henry situation, actually. He was just waiting for the right moment. I ran my fingers over the desk's smooth surface. This is too much. It's appropriate. You're not cleaning and organizing anymore, Leah. You're consulting, managing, actually using that brilliant brain of yours. Grace moved into the room, her expression turning serious. My brother is giving you a real position because you've earned it. Not because you're together now. Those are separate things. Are they? I sank into the ergonomic chair that fit perfectly. Everyone will think. Everyone who matters knows you've been doing this level of work for years, without proper recognition or compensation. She placed a folder on the desk. Your new contract, Salary commensurate with your actual responsibilities. Official title, Director of Operations. You'll oversee household management, but also coordinate with Marco's business managers, handle scheduling across divisions, manage special projects. I opened the folder, and the salary number made me blink. Grace, this is what you're worth. Maybe even less than you're worth. But Marco was trying to be reasonable. She grinned. I told him to double it. He compromised at 1.5 times. I can't accept this. You can, and you will. Because if you don't, I'll be insulted that you think so little of your own value. Grace's tone turned stern. You've been undercharging yourself for 3 years, Kara. No more. Before I could argue further, Marco appeared in the doorway. He'd clearly been waiting for Grace to brief me first, giving me space to process without his overwhelming presence influencing my decision. Leah. He entered slowly, gauging my reaction. If the office isn't suitable, we can... It's perfect. The words came out softer than I intended. It's too perfect. Marco, I don't need all this to do my job. I know you don't need it. That's not why I'm offering it. He leaned against the desk, close enough that I could smell his cologne. For 3 years, you've worked twice as hard as anyone else, solved problems before I knew they existed, and managed impossible situations with grace. This position isn't charity. It's recognition of what you've already been doing without proper acknowledgement. People will say you're giving me special treatment because we're together. Let them. His voice carried absolute certainty. Anyone who's worked with you knows the truth, and anyone who doesn't matter enough to matter. Grace cleared her throat diplomatically. I'm going to check on lunch preparations. You two talk. After she left, Marco remained silent, letting me process. It was one of the things I'd learned about him. He knew when to push and when to simply be present. I'm scared, I admitted finally. What if I mess this up? What if people think I'm only here because of us? What if I prove everyone right by failing spectacularly while tripping over my own feet and breaking something important? Then you'll pick yourself up, fix what you broke, and continue being extraordinary. Marco's hand covered mine on the desk. Leah, you've been afraid of your own competence for as long as I've known you. You hide behind the chaos, the clumsiness, the jokes, the self-deprecation. But I've watched you negotiate with vendors who intimidate trained professionals. I've seen you reorganize entire filing systems that financial experts couldn't navigate. You defused a confrontation with the Calabrian family's accountant, using nothing but logic and charm. I told him his spreadsheet formatting was criminally inefficient and suggested he use color coding, I muttered. He laughed and agreed to the revised terms. Exactly. You have a gift for seeing through pretense to the actual problem, for finding solutions others miss because they're too busy protecting their egos. His thumb traced circles on my wrist. Stop hiding. Be brilliant openly. Let people see what I've seen for years. I wanted to argue, to list all the reasons this was too much, too fast, too complicated. Instead, I asked, what's my first project? Marco's smile was worth the leap of faith. The Santoro contract negotiations. They're stalling on the Northwestern Territory Division. I need fresh perspective. Someone who can see patterns I'm too close to notice. The Northwestern Territory Division is stalling because they're not actually negotiating in good faith, I said immediately, pulling up the files I'd memorized months ago. They're running out the clock until the Delgado family completes their harbor acquisition. Once that's done, the Santoros think they'll have better leverage. But the Delgado timeline is delayed by at least 6 weeks due to environmental permits. If you apply pressure now, the Santoros will fold rather than wait. Marco stared at me. How did you know about the Delgado permits? I read the regional development reports you get weekly. The harbor project requires Coastal Commission approval, which is delayed pending ecological surveys. It's in the footnotes of the March briefing, page 17, second paragraph. I pulled up the document to verify. See? Right there. 6 to 8 week delay. Possibly longer if the survey finds anything problematic. You read my regional development reports. I read all your reports. How else would I know what you might need? I looked up from the screen to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. What? I'm reconsidering your salary. It should definitely be higher. Marco, I'm serious. Leah, my business advisors missed that connection. My negotiation team didn't make that link. You saw it because you read footnotes in briefings most people skim. It's not that impressive. I just pay attention. It's incredibly impressive. And it's exactly why you belong in this office, with this title, doing this work. He stood, pulling me to my feet. One condition, though. What? You still organize the household schedule. Grace and I are lost without your system. I laughed. That wasn't in the contract. Consider it a bonus responsibility, though we're paying you extra for it now. You're impossible. I'm in love with you. The words came out casual, like he'd been saying them for years instead of for the first time. That tends to make people do impossible things. My breath caught. Marco, too soon? He didn't look worried. I can take it back. Pretend I said something less dramatic. Perhaps I'm quite fond of you, or you're growing on me like an affectionate fungus. Affectionate fungus? I panicked. You make me panic. It's your fault. He pulled me closer, his hands settling at my waist. But the sentiment stands. I love you, Leah. Your chaos, your brilliance, your terrible vegetable comparisons, your inability to walk 3 steps without incident. All of it. I should have been terrified, should have questioned the speed of this, the intensity. Instead, I said, I love you too. Even though you're controlling and possessive, and you glowered at Henry like he'd committed a crime. In my defense, I thought he had committed a crime. Against me. By existing near you. That's not how crimes work. It should be. He kissed my forehead, then my nose, then finally my mouth. Fair warning. I'm going to be terrible at this, at being open, at not defaulting to control when I'm worried about your safety, at accepting that you're capable of handling situations without my interference. And I'm going to be terrible at being organized while not breaking things, at accepting help without arguing, at remembering that I'm allowed to be confident instead of self-deprecating. I leaned into him. We'll be disasters together, my favorite kind of disaster. The intercom on my new desk buzzed. Apparently it was connected to Marco's study. Patrick's voice crackled through. Boss, the Santoro lawyer is online too. Should I tell him you're busy? Marco looked at me, eyebrows raised. What do I tell him? Tell him the Northwestern Territory terms are non-negotiable, but you're willing to discuss the harbor access clauses if they commit by end of week. Mention you're aware of regional developments that might affect their timeline. Let him infer you know about the Delgado delay, without stating it outright. That's my line? That's your leverage. Make them think you know more than you do, which you do now, because I told you. I shooed him toward his office. Go negotiate. I have work to do. Apparently I'm director of operations now. Very important. Much responsibility. Leah, I turned back. Thank you, Marco said simply, for seeing me, for choosing this, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for building me an office so I'd stop organizing your life from a kitchen corner like some kind of domestic wizard. Domestic wizard. He shook his head, smiling. I'll add that to your official title. After he left, I sat in my new chair, in my new office with my new title and impossible salary, and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not happiness exactly. Something bigger, something that felt like belonging. Grace appeared in the doorway with espresso. Perfect temperature, perfect crema. Welcome to the family business, Kara, she said. Try not to reorganize us out of existence. No promises, I replied, already pulling up the Santoro files with renewed purpose. But I'll try to give you warning before I revolutionize everything. That's all anyone can ask. Through the wall, I could hear Marco's voice, measured and confident as he delivered the negotiation terms I'd outlined. When he reached the part about regional developments, he paused, I imagined him smiling, and then deployed the leverage with perfect precision. I opened my laptop and got to work, feeling more myself than I had in years. Clumsy, brilliant, chaotic, essential me, finally in exactly the right place. 3 weeks into our new reality, I discovered that loving Marco Rossi meant accepting two contradictory truths simultaneously. He trusted me completely with his business operations, and he trusted no one completely with my safety. "You're doing it again," I said, without looking up from the logistics report I was reviewing. "I can feel you hovering." "I'm not hovering." Patrick's voice came from the doorway of my office. "I'm providing security oversight. You've been standing there for 10 minutes watching me type. That's hovering." I turned to face him, arms crossed. "Marco sent you, didn't he? Boss wants to ensure the office is secure. New protocols since you've taken on more visible responsibilities." Patrick had the decency to look slightly guilty. "You're handling sensitive information now. Contract details, negotiation strategies, financial projections. That makes you a potential target for people who'd like to undermine the family's operations." "I've been handling sensitive information for 3 years. What's actually changed?" "Now people know you're handling it. There's a difference between being invisible staff and being officially positioned as the director of operations." He moved into the room, his expression serious. "Leah, you're not just Marco's girlfriend. You're becoming a strategic asset to the organization. That changes your risk profile." I wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. In the past 3 weeks, I'd attended 2 negotiation meetings, consulted on 4 major contracts, and somehow become the person other department heads contacted when they needed clarity on Marco's priorities. My visibility had increased exponentially. "Fine. Hover discreetly." I returned to the report. "But if you start commenting on my typing speed, we're going to have words." "Your typing speed is impressive. 78 words per minute with minimal errors." "Patrick, just stating facts." He grinned. "Boss also wants me to accompany you to your lunch with Henry and Thomas tomorrow. Security precaution." I sighed. Of course he does. The lunch in question had been rescheduled twice due to conflicting schedules, and I was genuinely excited to finally meet Henry's partner properly. But Marco had been increasingly anxious about it, despite now knowing Henry posed zero romantic threat. "It's not about Henry," Marco had explained the previous evening as we reviewed contracts in his study. "It's about you being in public spaces without security, establishing patterns that people could track, being vulnerable. I'm having lunch with friends, not conducting espionage. To anyone watching, you're now a known associate of the Rossi family. That alone makes you interesting." His hand had found mine across the desk. "I'm not trying to control you, Leah. I'm trying to protect you from dangers you haven't encountered yet because I've kept them away from you." Now, facing Patrick's protective stance, I understood Marco's concern wasn't about jealousy. It was about a world I was only beginning to fully understand. "Okay," I said finally. "You can come to lunch. But you're sitting at a separate table and pretending not to know us." I refused to introduce my security detail to Henry like it's normal. It is normal. For this life. It's not normal for me. Not yet. I saved the report and stood. "I need time to adjust to being someone who needs protecting. Give me that at least." Patrick's expression softened. "Boss said you'd resist. Also said to tell you that resistance is pointless because he's already arranged security whether you agree or not. But he'd prefer you to agree, so you don't spend energy fighting something designed to keep you safe." "He said that exactly?" I'm paraphrasing. He actually said, "Tell her I love her stubbornness, but I love her safety more. And if she argues, remind her she once insisted I wear a seatbelt in my own car, because statistics matter." I laughed despite myself. That's more accurate. "So we agree? I accompany you tomorrow, discreet but present?" "We agree. But Patrick?" I met his gaze. "Thank you for taking this seriously, for understanding I'm not just." I gestured vaguely. "Whatever people think I am." "Your family," Patrick said simply. "Grace adores you. Marco loves you. That makes you one of us. We protect our own." The words settled something anxious in my chest. Family. Not just Marco's girlfriend or the director of operations, but actually part of this complicated, dangerous, fiercely loyal unit. That evening, I found Marco in his study, staring at security protocols with the kind of intensity usually reserved for hostile takeovers. "Patrick told me about tomorrow," I said, closing the door behind me. Thank you for caring enough to worry. But Marco, you can't bubble wrap me forever. I can try. He didn't look up from the documents. These are threat assessments from the last 6 months. 3 separate attempts to gather information about my operations through indirect approaches. One tried to bribe a vendor, another posed as a journalist. The third approached Grace at a charity event. I moved behind him, reading over his shoulder. None of them succeeded. Because we were vigilant. Because we anticipated threats. Because we maintained security protocols even when they seemed excessive. He finally turned to face me. I'm not trying to control you, Leah. I'm trying to ensure you're still here next week, next month, next year. That I don't lose you because I was too concerned about seeming overbearing to implement proper protection. You won't lose me. I knelt beside his chair, taking his hands. But you need to trust that I'm not as fragile as you fear. I've survived 25 years of spectacular clumsiness. I can survive being loved by you. It's not the same thing. Isn't it? You're worried I'll get hurt because of who you are. I'm worried I'll break something important in your life because of who I am. We're both afraid of our own natures damaging the other person. I squeezed his hands. But Marco, I choose this. The security concerns, the complications, the visibility. I choose all of it because I choose you. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You're more resilient than I give you credit for. And you're more terrified than you admit, which is actually sweet, in a controlling Italian way. Controlling Italian way? He pulled me into his lap with a raised eyebrow. Should I be insulted? You should be aware that your particular brand of protective intensity is very culturally specific. I settled against him, feeling the tension gradually leave his shoulders. Also that I find it simultaneously frustrating and endearing. Simultaneously. I'm complex. I contain multitudes. You should know this about me by now. Marco laughed, the sound vibrating through his chest into mine. I'm learning. Every day, I discover something new about you that I didn't know I needed. Like what? Like how you hum show tunes when you're solving complex problems. Like how you make terrible vegetable puns when you're nervous. Like how you somehow reorganized my entire security protocol filing system by threat level and probability without being asked. And it's actually brilliant. The old system was chaos. Color coding by type instead of severity. Amateur hour. You're perfect, Marco said softly. Perfectly imperfect. Chaos organized into beauty. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my organizational skills. I meant it about you. The organizational skills are secondary. We sat there in comfortable silence, the weight of his arms around me feeling less like control and more like home. Tomorrow, I said eventually, you're going to worry the entire time I'm at lunch. You'll probably text Patrick every 15 minutes for updates. You'll imagine worst-case scenarios that would never actually happen. Accurate assessment. And I'm going to go anyway, have a lovely meal with my friends, discuss pasta shapes and probably embarrass myself at least twice. And then I'll come home to you, safe and sound, and you'll realize your worry was disproportionate to the actual danger. Also accurate, though I reserve the right to worry regardless. Deal. I kissed him softly. But Marco, at some point, you're going to have to trust that love doesn't make me weaker. It makes me more careful. Because now I have something to come back to. His arms tightened around me. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise. I just hid it behind the clumsiness. I pulled back to look at him properly. Stop underestimating the disaster girlfriend. She's more capable than she appears. The disaster girlfriend, Marco repeated with amusement. Is that your official title now? Director of Operations and Disaster Girlfriend. It has a nice ring to it. It truly doesn't. Too late. I'm having business cards made. The next day, lunch with Henry and Thomas went perfectly. No threats materialized. No dangerous situations emerged. And I only spilled water once. On myself, naturally. Patrick sat 3 tables away, somehow managing to look both intimidating and invisible simultaneously. Thomas was delightful. Warm, funny, exactly as wonderful as Henry had described. They told stories about their cat, Mr. Whiskers, with the kind of affection that made my heart happy. Henry asked about work without prying into specifics, respecting boundaries he probably didn't fully understand but recognized as necessary. "You seem settled," Henry observed as we finished dessert. "Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am," I said honestly. "It's complicated and sometimes overwhelming, but it's real. And right." "Good." He squeezed my hand across the table. "You deserve real and right, Leah, even if it comes with security details at separate tables." "You noticed." "Hard not to, but I get it. Marco's world comes with precautions." Henry smiled. "As long as you're choosing it freely, that's what matters." When I returned to the mansion that afternoon, Marco was waiting in my office, pretending to review documents, but clearly just watching for my arrival. "I survived," I announced. "Not even a minor catastrophe. Your worry was entirely unfounded." Patrick sent updates, 6 of them. Marco stood, pulling me into his arms. "I'm working on the overbearing protective instinct. Grace says it might take a decade." "I have time," I said against his chest. "We have time." And in that moment, surrounded by contracts and security protocols, and the evidence of our complicated, beautiful reality, I believed it completely. 2 months into our official relationship, I discovered that love could coexist with frustration in ways I'd never anticipated. "You changed my security clearance," I said, standing in Marco's study doorway with a tablet displaying the new restrictions. "I can't access the Northeastern Division files anymore." Marco didn't look up from his computer. "Temporary measure. Intelligence suggests the Moretti family is probing for information about our operations. Until we determine their angle, I'm limiting access to sensitive regions." Without discussing it with me first. "It's a security decision, not a personal one." "It's both." I moved into the room, setting the tablet on his desk with more force than necessary. "Marco, you promoted me to Director of Operations. You gave me responsibilities, authority, trust, and then you unilaterally revoke access when you decide I need protecting. That's not partnership. That's control." Finally, he looked at me. "The Morettis are dangerous. If they're targeting information and you're compromised, then we address it together. You warn me. We adjust protocols. We make decisions as a team." I crossed my arms. "You can't love me and trust me while simultaneously treating me like a liability that needs managing." "You're not a liability. You're—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. "I'm what? Too important to risk? Too precious to expose to reality?" My frustration bubbled over. "I understand your world better than you think, Marco. I've watched, listened, connected dots you assumed I'd miss. I know about the shipping routes through Rotterdam that aren't just shipping. I know the real estate acquisitions in the harbor district involve more than property development. I know because I'm not naive, and I'm not blind." The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. "You know," Marco said quietly, "and you've never said anything. Because knowing and needing to discuss are different things. You protect me from details I don't require. I respect that. But don't protect me so thoroughly that you erase the person you fell in love with. The one who sees clearly, thinks strategically, and handles complex situations without falling apart." Marco stood, moving around the desk. "I'm terrified of losing you. Every decision I make is filtered through that fear. The Morettis, the Calabrians, even minor threats. They all represent possibilities where you get hurt because of me. Then let me help navigate those threats instead of hiding me from them." I softened my tone, seeing the genuine fear beneath his control. "I'm not asking to be involved in the dangerous parts. I'm asking to be treated as someone capable of understanding them. There's a difference." "You're right." The admission seemed to cost him. "I'm overcompensating. Grace told me the same thing last week. Patrick mentioned it yesterday. Apparently I'm suffocating you while thinking I'm protecting you." "You're not suffocating me. You're just hovering, very intensely, in multiple time zones simultaneously." Despite the tension, Marco's mouth quirked. "That's specific. I access the security logs. You've been monitoring my location even when Patrick's with me. That's hovering in stereo, Marco. It's excessive." It's loving you, he countered, but without his earlier defensiveness. But I hear what you're saying. I'll restore your access. I'll include you in security discussions that affect you. I'll trust that the woman who reorganized my entire operation while tripping over furniture can handle knowing about the Moretti situation. Thank you. I moved closer, taking his hands. I'm not asking you to stop worrying. Worry all you want. Just don't let worry turn into control disguised as protection. Noted. Though you should know the Moretti situation is actually concerning. Not manufactured danger to justify my behavior. Real, strategic probing into our northeastern operations. Then brief me properly. Tell me what to watch for. What information they're likely seeking. How I can help, instead of being a weakness to guard. Over the next hour, Marco laid out the situation with complete honesty. The Morettis wanted territory they'd lost in a negotiation years ago. They were gathering intelligence on current operations, looking for leverage points. My access to comprehensive files made me a potential target, not for physical harm, but for social engineering or information extraction. They might approach me, I said, processing. Pose as vendors, clients, friendly contacts trying to gather details. Exactly. Which is why I wanted to limit your access. Less information means less value as a target. But it also means less ability to recognize when I'm being targeted. I pulled up the Northeastern Division files he'd restored. If I don't know what's sensitive, I can't protect it properly. Better to know everything and be alert than know nothing and be vulnerable through ignorance. Again, you're right. I'm learning that your instincts for strategy are usually better than my instincts for protection. They're different instincts, I corrected. Both valuable. We just need to use them together instead of in opposition. The Moretti threat materialized 3 days later, exactly as we'd anticipated, but from an unexpected angle. I was reviewing vendor contracts when my phone rang. Unknown number, which I normally didn't answer. But given current circumstances, I put it on speaker with Patrick present. Miss Walker? This is Thomas Santoro, Regional Development Coordinator. The voice was smooth, professional. I'm calling regarding the harbor project consultation we discussed. We hadn't discussed any harbor project. This was the probe. I caught Patrick's eye, keeping my voice casual. I'm sorry, Mr. Santoro. I think you have the wrong person. I'm not involved in harbor developments. Oh? My apologies. I was told you were Director of Operations for Rossi Holdings. The harbor project intersects with several of your managed territories. Classic fishing technique. Provide general information, see what details the target volunteers. I manage operational logistics, not regional development. You'd want to speak with our property acquisition team. I kept my tone helpful but vague. I can transfer you to that department if you'd like. No need. Perhaps I was misinformed. A pause. Though if you do happen to review any files related to Northeastern Harbor access, I'd be interested in discussing potential collaboration. The Moretti family is always looking for mutually beneficial arrangements. There it was, the Moretti name, dropped deliberately. I'll keep that in mind if anything relevant crosses my desk, I said pleasantly. Thank you for calling. After disconnecting, Patrick was already texting Marco. That was smooth. Most people would have either volunteered information or gotten defensive. Most people haven't spent 3 years watching Marco negotiate. You learn to recognize fishing expeditions. I documented the call in our security log. They know my name, my title, and that I have file access. What they don't know is whether I'm aware enough to recognize their approach. Now they know you are. That'll change their strategy. Good. Better they approach me carefully than assume I'm an easy target. When Marco arrived home that evening, he pulled me into his study before I could even set down my bag. Patrick briefed me, the Santoro call. His hands framed my face. You handled it perfectly. Better than perfectly. You gave them nothing while appearing helpful. That's advanced tradecraft, Leah. I pay attention. You've taught me well. I leaned into his touch. Still think I need protecting from information? I think you've proven you can handle more than I credited. He kissed my forehead. I'm sorry. For underestimating you. For letting fear make decisions instead of trust. You're learning. We both are. I pulled back to look at him properly. This life we're building, it's not traditional. It's not simple, but it's ours. And I choose it, Marco. All of it. The complications, the dangers, the protective security details. I choose this world because I choose you. Even knowing what it means. The constant vigilance, the calculated risks, the reality that people like the Morettis will always be probing for weaknesses. Especially knowing that. Because those challenges don't change how I feel about you. They're context, not deal breakers. I laced my fingers through his. I'm not naive enough to think love conquers everything, but I'm optimistic enough to believe we can navigate everything together. Marco's expression softened into something vulnerable and hopeful. Together. I like the sound of that. Good, because you're stuck with me now. Chaos, clumsiness, strategic thinking, and all. My favorite combination. 6 months later, I stood in our bedroom. Somewhere along the way, my apartment lease had expired, and I'd simply stayed, neither of us acknowledging the transition until Grace started calling it our place, getting ready for the annual charity gala. The dress was elegant, burgundy silk that Marco had insisted on buying despite my protests. But I'd won the argument about shoes, selecting practical heels I could actually walk in instead of the designer torture devices he'd suggested. You look beautiful, Marco said from the doorway, already dressed in his tuxedo. Though I maintain the Louboutins would have been stunning. The Louboutins would have resulted in me falling down the stairs and creating a scene. These are stunning and functional. I turned, letting him zip the dress. How do I look? Appropriately professional for the director of operations attending her first major social event in official capacity? You look like the woman I love. His hands settled at my waist. But yes, also appropriately professional. Grace will be proud. The gala was everything I'd expected. Wealthy donors, careful politics, the subtle dance of power and influence. But this time, I wasn't serving. I was participating. Marco introduced me without hesitation to business associates, rivals, allies. Not as his girlfriend trying to hide in the background, but as his partner in every sense that mattered. So you're the one who reorganized the Northeastern operations, a silver-haired man said during cocktails. Santoro mentioned you were formidable. Mr. Santoro called me by mistake, I replied smoothly. But I appreciate the compliment nonetheless. The man laughed, understanding the unspoken message. Smart and diplomatic, Rossi chose well. After he moved on, Marco leaned close. You just earned respect from the Calabrian family's financial advisor. That's not easy. I simply told the truth. I am smart and diplomatic. I sipped champagne. Also, your security protocols are showing. Patrick hasn't taken his eyes off me all evening. Can you blame him? You're the most interesting person here. I'm the person who tripped over the red carpet entrance, which you recovered from with Grace, immediately made a self-deprecating joke to the photographer, and turned a potential embarrassment into a charming moment. Marco's pride was evident. You're extraordinary, Leah. I wish you saw yourself the way I see you. I'm getting there, slowly, with help from an overprotective Italian with control issues and an inconvenient habit of being right about my capabilities. Inconvenient for whom? For me. Makes it harder to hide behind self-doubt when you keep proving I'm more competent than I pretend. We danced later, surrounded by the same wealthy elite I'd once served. The difference was surreal. Same venue, different perspective. Then, I'd been invisible. Now, I was seen. What are you thinking? Marco asked, sensing my contemplative mood. That a year ago, I was delivering desserts to this hotel through the service entrance. Now I'm dancing in the ballroom with the man who owns it. I met his eyes. It's strange and wonderful and slightly terrifying. Regrets? None. Questions, yes. Doubts about whether I belong here occasionally. But regrets? Never. I rested my head against his shoulder. You gave me a chance to be more than I thought possible. This life, this work, this partnership, it's everything I didn't know I wanted. You gave me something too, Marco said quietly. You gave me the courage to be human again, to want things beyond power and control, to believe I could be loved not despite who I am, but including all of it. The song ended, but we remained on the dance floor, swaying gently while other couples moved around us. I love you, I said simply. Your control issues, your protective instincts, your terrible habit of monitoring my location across multiple platforms. All of it. I love you too. Your chaos, your brilliance, your inability to walk without incident, your spectacular vegetable-based insults, and your capacity to reorganize my entire world while humming show tunes. We're ridiculous. We're perfect. And standing there in the ballroom where our complicated story had begun, surrounded by the life we were building together, I believed him completely. We were chaos and control, finding balance, disaster and precision, creating harmony. Two people who'd learned that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being perfectly imperfect together.